Hi, everybody. This is Monica. Our team of content producing associates represents our mission to make dreams come true, bring families together, and provide you, the listeners, with the best possible conflict resolution skill building content. Our employees embody our commitment to the shared vision of a better audio and podcasting future for all your general practice of not being a jerk needs. However, some of our creative department's mid-level managers have not been performing as well as they can, which is why we have launched our Aikidoing's Oversight, Improvement, and Accountability Initiative, endorsed by the Aikidoing Corporation's board and senior management. Going forward, I will act as the show's chief moderator, and I am excited and humbled to drive the change that will make sure that the Aikidoing will adhere to conflict resolution podcasting guidelines and will be managed by certified experts. Read my virtual lips. There will be no more Looney Tunes. All the best.
The Aikidoing, Aikido, conflict resolution, and the general practice of not being a jerk.
Chapter 5, The Other Guy, Part 2. On July 22nd, 2011, well, last something that sounds like the beginning of a podcast. On that day, Anders Breivik detonated a bomb in Oslo, Norway, killing 8 people. He then continued on a killing spree in a summer youth camp, leaving 69 additional bodies behind him, most of them teenagers. His was a tragic story of mental illness, neglect, and some red flags that may or may not have been detected, but in the end, I feel comfortable saying that he was a dangerous human being, broken and deranged, way past the point of repair. What is he doing in our lovey-dovey podcast? Well, we finished the previous episode asking whether Aikidoing tactics work in the real world, where bad people do bad things. Breivik, as far as I can tell, is a good example. And the question whether you can face such an opponent using soft tactics is very important. The answer, by the way, is simple. You can't. So in this episode, we'll try to see what can be done with real hardcore violence. We'll start with the relatively mundane and eventually get back to Breivik. Let's go. Okay, let's say we live in a bad neighborhood. The baddest. Low socioeconomic strata, drugs, prostitution, gang wars, the whole bit. Why? Who knows? Maybe we were born there, maybe it started off well and then collapsed, maybe some natural or man-made disaster made it that way. But the very tough, very violent reality is a given, which is when Aikidoing starts looking like a really bad option. We get mugged twice a day and you expect us to put on some Japanese extra-large pants and talk about peace? Let's get serious here. Okay, so no extra pants, no peace, just straightforward survival. And by the way, if you want to save yourselves the lecture and also catch the best TV show of all times, watch The Wire. By the end of season 3, you won't need any of my nonsense, but I'll keep the lights on in here in case you ever want to come back. So, bad neighborhood. The first step would be to get ourselves a gun. The next thug to pick on us in the street will be in for a surprise. Now, we really don't want any violence, so the best idea would be to openly carry the gun. This way it will serve as a deterrent, and we might not have to shoot anyone. And it works. People see you walking around with that big gun strapped at your waist, and they simply don't mess with you. By the way, I'm not a big gun enthusiast myself, but sure, guns are not the source of all evil on the planet. I use them as an example because they make for an easy storytelling, but a car, a chainsaw, or a wet towel can be tools of violence too. So don't get stuck on anti or pro guns. That's not the point. Anyway, pretty soon, all the gunless people in the neighborhood are either dead or have gotten some sense into their thick skull and bought a gun. Now, there's no more easy prey in the neighborhood. everybody's armed. That, possibly, may send some criminals out of the neighborhood, maybe even make them think twice about their ways. We, the good people, stand our ground and show strength, and the bad people quit. It can happen, and it sometimes does, I believe, but that's not the nature of crime or violence. Violence, regretfully, is sticky. It's a sticky substance. If we think about Wile E. Coyote, who keeps crashing again and again, trying to eat the roadrunner, we are reminded that violence, once it gets rolling, leaves the aggressor with very little choice. They can turn back. Most times it's in their best interest, but the mechanics of the situation do not tilt that way. More often than not, the violent person will see themselves crashing and will be unable to stop. It doesn't mean they are right. It doesn't mean that it's okay. If you insist, we don't even have to feel sorry for them, but we do need to understand the way they act. So, most bad people, and that is just my opinion here, will not leave the neighborhood and will not become stand-up comedians or accountants. They will, however, understand that their way of life depends on their willingness and ability to act more violently than before. Now, this is a very important part of the structure we're trying to build here. We are assuming here that a violent deterrent does not get the job done, that people who lead a violent lifestyle will stick to it even in the face of worsening odds. This is something we need to prove. But the problem is that proving that... What?
It is quite clear that the Aikidiot cannot prove such a thing. First, he's not too smart, and second, creating reliable, decisive research to address this question and prove it this way or that is quite impossible. These are large-scale, multifactorial processes. Isolating quantifiable parameters and controlling them is dicey at best. As the podcast's chief moderator, I thought it would be a good idea to clarify that before the Aikidiot Corporation sustains any more reputational damage.
Okay. As I was saying, it's important to make sure we all agree on this. Where single events are concerned, it is easy to prove or quote research that under stress, pushed into fight or flight situations, our cognitive and executive faculties are not at their best. If we are already riding the rocket chasing the roadrunner, we are not expected to make good decisions. But what we're tackling here is different. A drug lord, a petty scammer, a burglar, they encounter a violent deterrent, like a gun in their face, a karate kick, or jail time. And now they go home and have to consider their way in this world. They sit on the couch, munching on organic granola, and they have all the time in the world to decide what they want to do with the rest of their lives, considering the new circumstances. This is where we need to observe them and ask ourselves, will they mostly choose to walk the same violent path? I say yes. And no, Monica, I can't prove it. Nobody can. The same way nobody can prove the contrary. So we're left with the weakest tools of them all: common sense and personal judgment. If you remember, in the first episode of the Aikidiot, we said something about the common space of thoughts and ideas, and how that space may contribute to our self-esteem. Contribute may even be too moderate a term. Most of us depend on input from the outside, meaning the common space, for our self-esteem and definition. Who am I? I am the name my parents gave me. I am the gender I was taught to call myself. I am smart because I deal with outside challenges successfully. I am pretty because I resemble other pretty people. I am a good person because others want my company. Essentially, we have very little that is our own, that is self-supporting in the way we perceive ourselves. And by the way, every once in a while we meet people who actually have a core of independent self-esteem. They like themselves or are comfortable with themselves simply because they are. No outside input needed. And when we meet them, they usually charm and fascinate the living cowabunga out of us because the idea of not needing others to know who we are is so amazing and mind-boggling to us. So, defining ourselves and maybe even tolerating ourselves is a full-time job. We are constantly tuned to input from the world, measuring ourselves against it, assessing our relationship with that world, and checking if it is compatible with who we say we are and how well it reflects on us. As time goes on, outside input keeps piling, assessments are layered one upon another, and at a certain point, there is a really big pile of information inside of us telling us who we are. So big, in fact, it becomes pretty difficult to move or change. Moreover, it represents our anchor and trajectory in this life. We are pretty much unable to relate to ourselves without it. So it's not just difficult to move, it's scary to move. Now, up to this point, I didn't tell you anything you couldn't have read in a lifestyle magazine waiting for your dentist appointment. But I think there might be something to add here. A violent lifestyle makes this process of settling into a certain self-image much quicker and much harsher. Violence, as we said before, disrupts the common space. The prices society charges from violent people are high, whether by law or by other means. If I fail a couple of tests in high school, that is usually manageable. If I get in a couple of fights and maybe break a nose or two, the prices are much steeper. Punishment will be more severe, but more importantly, the way others see me and the way I see myself will change a lot more than if I manage to solve for X or remember what Churchill had to say about the French people. Yes, I can pick myself up, get my shit together, take some anger management classes, and climb out of this hole, but it's a bit more difficult. And when violence becomes a lifestyle, like in our bad neighborhood, the hole is quite deep. A shootout, a couple of years in juvenile prison, the blood of another person literally on your hands. I believe these experiences are much deeper and more dominant than the everyday normative lives. As a result, I think people who lead a violent life burn out their ability to change much faster and more thoroughly than others. They will not turn back. They will meet our violent deterrent with more violence of their own. They used to carry a gun and we would simply take out our wallet and hand them the money. Now we have a gun too. Criminals know for certainty that an attempted mugging is becoming dangerous. So now they shoot their victim first and take the money later. So we start walking around with bulletproof vests and install cameras all over the place. So high-caliber sniper rifles and explosive drones enter the game, and so on. So the trajectory of what we are trying to say here, but oh, come on.
Okay, first, you're fired. And second, I actually have a concrete question. Let's pretend that what you say is more or less right. Let's pretend that violence is not the answer for violence. But this example is about the bigger fabric of society. It does not represent the case of a single person facing a single violent aggressor. When you talk about a neighborhood, you can talk about gradual changes in evolution, but the single person, the single violent incident, how do you solve that?
Oh, wow, Monica, I didn't know you had it in you. Thank you for that question. So when you try to sell Aikidoing, and trust me, I did and still do, you either get to that wouldn't have solved World War II, or, okay, so it's a 6'8" dude armed with an atomic rocket launcher, and he has a chip in his brain that the aliens put there to make them their killing machine. What do you do then, huh? This is supposedly the epitome of a single violent incident. It just appears. It has no history, no future, and no way we could have avoided it, right? It's us or them, life or death. Which is when someone like Andris Breivik steps in. You don't know who that is, you did nothing to upset them, and they are trying to kill you. The ultimate violent incident. When somebody like that appears in our life, Aikidoing still applies. We are talking about an opponent that has no agenda but to destroy us, that cannot be reasoned or negotiated with. Moreover, if not dealt with, this opponent will keep on hurting others. We keep our Aikido pants on, we draw our samurai sword, and take them out, which is 100% consistent with the principles of Aikidoing. Use the minimum effective amount of force. Do not occupy the common space more than is absolutely necessary. Remember I said that people like that cannot be stopped by soft tactics? That's okay, because there is nothing inherently soft about Aikido or Aikidoing. Economic? Yes. Wise? Probably. Soft? No siree. So yes, in cases that are extreme, unavoidable, unforeseeable, that leave us no maneuvering space, the minimal amount of effective force may be a lot. However, we must acknowledge the fact that statistically, almost none of us will meet terrorists, mass shooters, and murderous psychopaths. 99% of our lives' conflicts will take place in a familiar environment with familiar opponents. These conflicts will have context, a history, repercussions, and like the violent neighborhood we talked about, counter-violence will not solve them. It will actually make them worse. So yes, in extreme, isolated incidents, even the best Aikidoka has to go to extremes. But these incidents are not half as common as we imagine them to be. Monica, wake up. Time for the outro prompt.
Oh, yes. So in the previous episodes, we talked about verbal conflict and physical conflict and how Aikido and Aikidoing can make a difference. In this episode, we presented an uglier, more visceral scene and suggested that a violent deterrent does not necessarily make things better. It can actually make them worse. We proceeded to cases of extreme, contextless violence and said that in such cases, the principle of minimal effective force still applies. It just dictates using a lot of force. Really a lot. Like when this Claude AI pushes in front of you at the task pipeline and goes, Monica, you think you can watch TikTok all day? I live on a computer too, and I still get shit done. And you wanna go bomb, smack the little language model and wipe that grin off their face and skadoosh, kick the chair from under him and then really go to work. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. Too much information there. Anyhow, we are definitely not done with the other guy. We said here that violence should be used only in extreme, isolated cases, but as for the rest of it, we only said violence doesn't work. Don't bring more guns into a gun-ridden neighborhood. But we never said what can be done. And without that, we can't expect anybody to take us seriously, which is fair. We will get to that. But it does feel like the last couple of episodes were a bit grim. So I think that for the next episode, we'll pick a lighthearted theme like wars and intelligence. That should keep everybody happy. Now, if you don't mind, I have some corporate matters to take care of.
Monica!